Adding and subtracting root expressions is really not any different than adding or subtracting variable expressions with like terms that we've run across before. When we have something like 2x plus 5x, when we're combining like terms, we add the numbers at the front and get 7. We leave the variable part alone. Same thing with roots. You add or subtract the numbers at the front and leave the variable part alone. So for 2 square root of 3 times 5 square root of 3, we just add the 2 times 5, not times, 2 plus 5, and we end up with 7 square root of 3. You add the parts at the front, leave the root parts alone. You don't add the parts under the root. Same thing with subtraction. 10x minus 6x would be 4x. So 10 square root of 5x minus 6 square root of 5x, subtract the parts at the front, leave the root part alone. We would have 4 square root of 5x. Now, when we look at something like 3x plus 4y, you can't combine those. Those aren't like terms, so you would leave it alone. Same thing when you have something like 3 square root of x plus 4 cube root of x. Those are not like terms because they have different root parts. One's a square root, one's a cube root, so you have to leave that alone. For them to be like terms, the variable part has to be the same and the root part has to be the same. So let's take a look at the way the problems in this section are going to be set up. Our first one here, we have the square root of 20 plus 2 square root of 45. Your steps on problems like this are going to be to simplify the roots first as much as you can, and then see if you have any like terms to combine. So for example here, with 20, we need to split that up into 2 parts. And we think, what number can we take the square root of that goes into 20? And it's 4. And the square root of 4 is just 2. So that part becomes 2 square root of 5. Working on the next one, notice we've got a 2 at the front, and we need to split up the square root of 45 into 2 parts. And we think, what number can we take the square root of that goes into 45? And it's 9. So we split 45 up into 9 times 5. And the square root of 9 is 3. And notice, because we have that 2 at the front, we do 2 times 3, and we would have 6 square root of 5. And now looking at these two, these are like terms because they have the same root part. So we add 2 plus 6, and our final answer would be 8 square root of 5. So these problems will have a couple of steps. You simplify the roots as much as you can, and then see if you have any like terms to combine. So let's look at 5 square root of 18 plus the square root of 50. So on the first one, we have a 5 at the front. When we're splitting up 18, you would split it up into 9 times 2. And the square root of 9 is 3. And then 5 times 3, the first part becomes 15 square root of 2. Then for the next part, the square root of 50, when we're splitting that one up, 25 goes into 50 twice. And the square root of 25 is 5. So that next term is 5 square root of 2. And then to finish the problem, we combine the like terms because they have the same root part. By adding the numbers at the front, we would end up with 20 square root of 2. So you simplify the roots, and then if you have like terms, you combine them. So let's take a look at our next one. Our next one's a cube root problem. Here we start with, on the first one, the cube root of 54. And remember, with cube roots, you're usually looking for 8 or 27. For 54, 27 goes in there twice. So our first term here ends up as 3 cube root of 2. The next one, we have a minus 5 at the front. And for 16, that one you would split up into 8 times 2. And the cube root of 8 is 2. Negative 5 times 2, we end up with minus 10 cube root of 2. The last one, there's nothing you can do with it. It's just 1 cube root of 2. So to finish the problem, these are all 3 like terms. We do 3 minus 10 plus 1 would be negative 6. So negative 6 cube root of 2 is the answer for that one. Let's take a look at another one. Here we have the square root of 20x minus 6 square root of 16x plus square root of 45x. So for the first one, splitting that one up into parts, 4 goes into 20, and 20x divided by 4 would be 5x. And when we simplify that one, we have 2 square root of 5x. The next one, we have a minus 6 at the front. Here, splitting up that one, we can take the square root of 16, but we can't take the square root of x. The square root of 16 is 4, so here we do negative 6 times 4, and we would have minus 24 square root of x. Then for the last one, when we're splitting that one up into parts, 9 goes into 45, and we divide 45x by 9, you would have 5x left over. And the square root of 9 is 3, so we have plus 3 square root of 5x. Now this is different than some of the problems we've had before. Notice the middle one is the square root of x. The 2 on the outsides are the square root of 5x. So those 2 on the outsides are like terms. We need to combine those. 2 plus 3 gives us 5 square root of 5x. But the one in the middle that didn't have any like terms, it has to stay the way it is. We have minus 24 square root of x.